Krishna Kund. Let's close. Mm-hmm. Sorry? Yeah, go ahead. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome to our program today. My name is Madhavananda Das. These are our adventures in Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is our 105th session in a series we're calling Meeting in Kurukshetra. We weren't able to do last week. It's a little hard for us now while we're traveling. We're in Hungary right now. But today we're going to be speaking on the 60th verse of the 47th chapter. And we'd like to say something about how the Gopis are greater than Laksmi, which is the topic for today. So we'll go ahead and we'll say a few prayers to begin with. Narayanam namaskrityam naramschaiva narotamam Devyam sarasvatyam vyasam tato jayam udirayat Vedi ramayaneschaiva purane bhadate tata Adavante cha madhye cha hari sarvatra giyate Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim Yat kripa tamaham vande shri gurum dinataranam Paramananda madhavam Paramananda he madhava Padunga luchi makaranda Se makaranda panakori Anande bolo hari hari Harinka name vandavela Parikoribe chakadola Se chakadolanka padaye Manamo rahu nirantare Manamo nirantare rahu Ha Krishna Boli Jiva Jao Ha Krishna Boli Jao Jiva Moteu Dada Radha Dava Moteu Dada Radha Dava Moteu Dada Radha Dava. It's working for others, Sarvadrik Prabhu. Lila Purushottam or Gorni Thai Prabhu, can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect. Such nice sound.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So, in Jiva Goswami's commentary is Loga Vaishnav Toshini. He glorifies Uddhava Gopi Mahatmya Vidvaryam Sarva Bhagavatotamam Tam Udavam Prapadyeham Tad Gitartha Vilubdhadi. That desiring to understand these words of Uddhava, this Gitartha Vilubdhadi, I surrender to that Uddhava, who is the most excellent person. He's the best of the devotees. Vidvaryam Sarva Bhagavatotamam, so that I can understand something about the Gopi Mahatmya, the glories of the gopis. So I want to look back a little bit on some of our previous sessions. In our last session, which was in Germany just a little before Janmashtami, it's been a little while now since we had a session like this, we were reading from the 59th verse, and I think it starts, Uddhava's words begin in the 58th or 59th verse, and he begins to glorify the gopis. And he addresses them. He says, "Oh, how these women, it's so astonishing. They're vyabhachara dushtaha. They're contaminated women. They're staying in the forest, but they become such great, great devotees." And so we spoke something mostly from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, where he says that vyabhachara dushta iti strinam trividyad vyabhicharas trividaha. That there's three types of vyabhachara dushta, or ladies who are contaminated or adulterous. And the first is someone who enjoys her husband and a paramour, a lover, and she's not faithful to either one. And such a lady, this is Vishnu says, Sahi Loka Shastrayor Vigataha. Ordinary society and Shastra condemns that. And then he says, there's a second, who's Patim Chaktva, Upapatim Ekam Evam, Ramayantyaha Anyaha. That she's given up, she's Patim Chaktva, she's given up her husband, but Upapatim Ekam Eva, she's only staying with her lover. And that woman, at least she has a good quality of being dedicated to one man. And the third type is Swapatim Chaktva, Upapatam Budya, Bhagavantam Eva Ramayanto Apara. She gives up her husband and she enjoys being the consort of Krishna. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that although common people criticize that, it's actually very, very exalted. And we spoke something from Srila Prabhupada about how we want to be Krishna conscious and not Vedic in that last session. I'm just reviewing a little something. And we read some very startling things from Prabhupada, such as a letter he wrote to Roy Ram in 1968, where he said that we are not vegetarian. We're Krishnarian. We're devotees. We're not interested in promoting vegetarianism. We want to promote bhakti. And then another letter Prabhupada wrote to Tukshta Krishna Maharaj on 4th of February, 1977. Prabhupada spoke to him. He said that we're against abortion, but we're not interested in propagating that or preaching anti-abortion. Our business is to focus on Krishna. So in his commentary, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also says that just as we have different ashrams, and within the Varnashram system, those ashrams, they give ashraya or shelter. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that bhakti also gives ashraya. And we commented how Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that if we're still practicing mixed bhakti, if we have material desires, then we have to act according to some version of Varnashram dharma. But Srila Prabhupada generally stresses the devotees to take shelter of bhakti, and that would solve everything. So that was a previous session. If someone's interested, they can find that, I think, on YouTube. Today I want to go on to text number 60, which is also spoken by Uddhava. Nayam Shriyanga Unitanta Rate Prasadaha Svaryoshitam nalina ganda rucham kutonyaha rasotsavesha bhujadanda grihita kanta labdasi samya udagad brajavalabhinam. When Lord Sri Krishna was dancing with the gopis in the Ras Leela, the gopis were embraced by the arms of the Lord. This transcendental favor was never bestowed upon the goddess of fortune or other consorts in the spiritual world. Indeed, never was such a thing even imagined by the most beautiful girls in the heavenly planets, whose bodily luster and aroma resembled the lotus flower. And what to speak of worldly women who are very beautiful according to material estimation. Gora graganya gana gocha goloruhadam Goranga gudatama gopyata kolpa briksham Gopala gada ratidam yati singha gora govinda deshikavaram satatam namami. So mostly, I want to read a little something from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. And we'd like to reflect about the relevance of this verse in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, because our topic is a meeting in Kurukshetra. And what we're trying to do with this subject matter is to show the connection between Braj Leela, Krishna's leaving Vrindavan, going to Mathura, Krishna's going to Dwarka, the meeting in Kurukshetra, and then ultimately the pastimes of Gauranga Mahaprabhu, and especially Mahaprabhu and Jagannath Puri. And all of these have a very intimate connection. And as we've been commenting in almost all these classes, some Vaishnavas say that this 47th chapter, the 10th canto, this Brahmara-gita, is the most important of all the chapters of the Bhagavatam, because it contains the ecstasy of Srimati Radharani. It describes her topmost feelings in separation. So in these verses, Vishwanath Chakravarti, Uddhava is speaking, he's glorifying the gopis, and how astonishing it is that the gopis, they seem like ordinary persons, but they're more exalted than Laksmi Devi, the goddess of fortune. And this is a very important contribution of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. It's a very important contribution of this 47th chapter. This is what Uddhava learned. Perhaps he didn't understand this because he was a Jnana Mishra Bhakta before he met the gopis. And as such, probably he thought that Lakshmi Devi is the greatest devotee of the Lord. But now he's stressing this thing to show that the gopis are not ordinary persons. And that Krishna, who is the beloved of the gopis, he's situated on the topmost platform of purity and morality, and he's always praiseworthy for all, even though Krishna does certain things, as we were commenting recently. Maybe even I can find it here. Let me see. Srila Jiva Goswami and, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he speaks about 18 different faults that are found in a conditioned soul, and how these faults are not found in Krishna. How they're not found in Lord Narayan. And that's the difference between the Lord Narayan and a conditioned soul. So he quotes the Vishnu Yamala, Mohas Chandra Brahmo Ruksha Rasata Kama Olbanaha Lolata Madamatsar Ye Hingsa Keda Parishramo Asatyam Kroda Akanksha Asanka Vishva Vibramaha Vishvam Atvam Parapeksha Dosha Asta Dosoditaha. 18 different faults. Dosha means fault. Asta Dasata, it means refers to 18. So these include things like madness and delusion, moha, tundra, which means great exhaustion or sleep. Brahma, the propensity to make a mistake. Mada, being intoxicated. Hingsa, doing violence. And so he comments that Krishna has 16 out of these 18 things. The only two that he doesn't have are Ruksha Rasata and Kama Ulbana. Ruksha Rasata means very rough, exploitive dealings. And Kama Ulbana means very intense, terrible lust. Krishna doesn't have these two things, but he has 16 of these other 18 faults. And paradoxically, it's these faults, so-called faults of Krishna, that make him superior to God, to make him superior to Lord Narayan. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that the gopis, just as Krishna is on the highest platform of purity and morality, although it looks like he's stealing, he's eating with the monkeys, he's seducing other men's wives, he's doing all these things which seem very bad, but actually Krishna is on the very highest platform of purity and morality. And this is something which is very, very important for us to understand in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Araja Bhagavan Braje Satanyas Tadama Brindavanam. It's described by Srinath Chakravarti Thakur in his Chaitanya Mata Manjusa commentary that out of all the different aspects of the Lord, Krishna is supreme, and Vrindavan is supreme, and Ramya Kacha Upasana Braja Vadu Vargena Vakalpita. Of all the devotees, the gopis are the best devotees. So this concept wasn't really there before the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It was found in the Bhagavatam in the 47th chapter, but who could understand that? Very, very few people could understand that thing. But with the advent of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then we began to understand something about the exalted position of the gopis. And this is a very important aspect of our philosophy. First of all, sometimes devotees, in kind of a sentimental way, they say, oh, I don't like Lord Narayan. I only like Krishna. But in actuality, Lord Narayan is Krishna. Narayan, they're non-different. But the examples given of the moon, there's a Purnima. The Purnima is full, it's complete, it's Purna. The Ardha Chandra, the half moon, is only half, but it's still the moon. It's not that you say, oh, the half moon's not really the moon. It's also the moon, but it's only exhibiting a partial manifestation of the moon. And so similarly, the form of the Lord, known as Lord Narayan, is only a partial manifestation of Krishna. And therefore, part of our important philosophy is that we want to place more stress on Radha Krishna rather than we do to Laksmi Narayan. And Raghunath Das Goswami, he's given us 11 verses in his Manasiksha, which contain the essence of advice. And in text 4, he says, Api Chaktva Lakshmi Patiratim Itovyom Anoyanim Braje Radha Krishna Swarati Manhito Tvam Bhajamana. He said, give up attraction for Lord Narayan, for attraction to Lakshmi Narayan, because that'll lead you to the planet of Vaikuntha. Instead, we should worship Radha and Krishna, because they, Swarati Manido Tvam Bhajamana, Swarati, their own pure love for themselves, they grant to us. So our philosophy is that Krishna is superior to Narayan. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, there's an important verse which also appears in the Madhya Lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Rupa Goswami describes it. Siddhanta Tvastabedepi Srisa Krishna Swarupayaha Rasanok Krishna Te Krishnam Rupam Esa Rasa Stitihi. And Mahaprabhu spoke this to Venkatabhatta, also that according to Siddhanta, Sri Isha, who's the Lord of Lakshmi, Lord Narayan, and Krishna, they're abeda, they're non-different. But rasano krishyate krishnam, rupamesha rasastitihi. In terms of rasa, Krishna is superior. And therefore, this is our philosophy, and it stems very importantly from this verses of Uddhava glorifying the Gopis in this 47th chapter of the 10th canto. We hear later in our Gaudiya Vaishnava theology and literature, Prabodhananda Saraswati, so transcendental madman. He says in Vrindavan Mahimamrita, Makuru karma na yogam. Makuru karma, don't do pious acts. Na yogam, don't practice yoga. Namakuru karma na yogam, na Vishnu bhajanam na vasravanam. Don't worship Lord Vishnu. Don't hear about the glories of Lord Vishnu. Dhruvam abapyasi pada padam. Brindaranya yatatata tishtan. Rather, with great conviction, you should stay in Vrindavan. Forget all this other things about Lord Narayan and this thing and that. There's a conversation that I found with Srila Prabhupada that took place in Montreal significantly in July of 1968. This was just before Shamsundar and Malati, Gurudas and Jamuna, Mukunda and Janaki went to London to preach and open the first center there, and they met the Beatles and they were just devotees. I think maybe one or two of them had been devotees for 1 year or something before that. And they were sent to do something which Srila Bhaktisiddhanta sent his topmost sannyasis to do. And they weren't able to really accomplish. And Prabhupada sent these new devotees. So before he sent them, they had a meeting with Srila Prabhupada in Montreal, Canada. And in that meeting, during that time, Malati had this conversation with Srila Prabhupada. Maybe I should put this on our screen here. I think I can do that for devotees who can see. Leela Purushottam, the paper makes a strong sound in the background.
That's what you're holding in your hands.
Okay. Oh, what am I looking for here? Right here. So Malati, she said, Swamiji, I don't understand when you say that you worship Krishna or Vishnu. I don't understand if Krishna is Vishnu or Vishnu is Krishna. They had a very, very simple understanding. And Prabhupada goes on. I'm just going to paraphrase a little bit of it and flip through it. You can look at it on the screen while we're reading. He speaks about Krishna and Vishnu and Lord Shiva, but Prabhupada says someone's status is higher than the others. Krishna is the original living entity, Govindamadi Purusham. So everything comes from him, and some of them are in the Vishnu category. And Prabhupada says the Vishnu category means they're almost equal to Krishna. It's estimated the Vishnu categories, he says, they have 94% opulence of Krishna. And the next category is a Shiva category, and like that. So Prabhupada says, so Krishna is not is cent percent. Vishnu or Narayan is 94%. Lord Shiva is 84%. And we in our perfection, we are 78%. Is that clear? And then Malati says, well, I don't understand then why you'd worship Vishnu and not Krishna. I don't understand why you'd go to Vishnu and not to Krishna if Krishna is the highest. And Prabhupada is speaking to her in a very sweet way. And he points out Saraswati, their daughter there. And Prabhupada's asking, why do you take care of your child? Why not some other child? They're also children. And Malati says, because this child was given to me. And Prabhupada says, you love him. That's all. Similarly, if you love Krishna, that's all right. If you love Vishnu, that's also all right. But you cannot derive the same result by loving Krishna and Vishnu. Therefore, it's your selection who you should love. Krishna is cent percent and Vishnu is 94%. So if you want to worship or love 94%, that is also almost Krishna. But Krishna is cent percent. Purnam. Mata parataram kinchit asidananjaya. And Prabhupada quotes the famous verse, Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo. So Prabhupada concludes then, he says, if I have to love, why not love the greatest personality, Krishna, who's 100% perfect? That is your selection. If you select 94%, there's no harm, but the best thing is, why not 100%? Is that all right? Not yet clear. The same Malati was a little confused in a conversation, but Prabhupada was being very clear. And Prabhupada was speaking something which is very traditional and very essential for Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And that's the difference between the worship of Lakshmi Narayan and Radha Krishna. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kaviraj Goswami describes it, Aishvarja Priti Sankuchita, that the nature of opulence and awe and reverence is that it makes love shrink. So we can't understand that in a certain platform. And therefore, Krishna himself had to come because he wanted to give this love of Vrindavan. And therefore, Raghunath Das Goswami teaches us, Nadamam, Nadarmam, Shruti Ganani Ruptam Kila Kuru. He said, don't do pious activities, don't do impious activities, don't read the Vedas. Bhajay Radha Krishna Pachura Paricharyam. Just worship Radha Krishna. And this is what Srila Prabhupada gave us, although devotees should note that Srila Prabhupada also commented that in our conditioned state, the deities of Radha Krishna don't accept our worship, but rather they accept it as Lakshmi Narayan. And therefore we worship Radha Krishna generally, except in New Brajadam, in a very opulent way. So there's a difference between Lakshmi Devi and the Gopis. And most people, especially in India, this is a new thing for those of us in the West, and we think, well, Radha Krishna is the topmost thing, and everybody accepts that. But that's not such a common conception. In India, to this day, a lot of people still, they think that Lakshmi Narayan, that they're the topmost forms of the Lord and his consort, and Radha Krishna is some lower thing. But we hear in the Skanda Purana how once, when they knew that Krishna was coming to this world, the Devatas, they were looking to how they could come to reside also on the earth planet. And so they decided that they would all reside on the body of the cow. And Jiva Goswami explains this also very nicely in Gopal Champu, how after the Govardhan Dharana Leela, after Krishna lifted Govardhan Hill, Indra came and begged apology for trying to mass murder all the Brijbasis. And at that time, all the demigods came and worshiped Krishna. And because all the demigods worshiped Krishna, he was known as Govinda. And because Krishna is worshipped by the cow, and all the demigods, the 33 million different demigods, are all present on different parts of the body of the cow. So all the different demigods, they came and they all got different places on the body of the cow. But Lakshmi Devi, who's Chanchala, she's a little restless, she arrived late. And Saraswati chastised her, what are you're always coming late, you're Chanchala, you make up your own rules, now there's no more place left for you to stay. And so then Lakshmi Devi, according to the Skanda Purana, became depressed. And she went to the Vindhya mountains to do some austerities to get another chance. And then she came back, and Saraswati was pleased then that she heard that there's one place that nobody else wanted where you can stay. And so Lakshmi Devi got that place, and she stayed in the back end of the cow, and she's present there in the gobar of the cow. She's present there in the milk and the urine and dung, those things from the cow. And it's significant then that Lakshmi Devi in this way, although we'll speak something about how she's also present in Bilvavan and how she's aspiring to come to Braj, Lakshmi Devi is also present in Braj in the form of Gobar, because Braj is the place of the cows, it's the planet of the cows, Golok, and Lakshmi Devi is present there in a very humble way. She's residing there in the form of that Gobar. Lochadas Thakur, Chaitanya Mangal, describes a very nice point. He says, Sakara se apane, nija dwara nahi jani. That sakara se apane, sugar can't understand its own sweetness. Only some other persons can understand it. Parajana kara upabhog, only other persons can taste it. So similarly, Krishna, the only way to understand Krishna is through the devotees. And Krishna himself becomes a devotee to understand what the devotees are tasting. And this is such a very, very important thing. Krishna doesn't manifest himself as a devotee in Vaikuntha or in Ayodhya so that he can taste the sweetness of the devotees there amongst the goddesses of fortune or the residents of Ayodhya, but he does manifest as a devotee in Kali Yuga, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so that he can taste the sweetness of Vrindavan. In Sridhar Swami's Bhavarta Dipika commentary, he describes Krishna as Ajita, someone who can't be conquered. He says, Ajita Jita. Although you can't be conquered by anybody, still you've become conquered by those devotees who are samamati bihi, who have controlled their minds and senses. Sadhubir bhavan jitatmabir bhavata. Vijitastepi chabrajatam akamatmam ya atmadoti karunaha. That these devotees, actually a verse from the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, which Sridhar Swami comments on, that although you can't be conquered by anyone, you're conquered by the devotees who have controlled their mind and senses, and you give yourself to those devotees. So the real expression of this is found in Vrindavan, in Braj, and we don't find a complete manifestation of this anywhere else. And Krishna, wanting to relish and glorify the residents of Vrindavan, he manifested his Braj Leela, but that wasn't enough because he himself couldn't taste what the gopis were tasting. He became greedy to taste that. He wanted to show the glories of the gopis' love. And we heard, I think, in the 46th chapter of this 10th canto, where Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains, he says, if we say that Ramya Kachirupasana Brajavadu Vargena Vakalpita, that the gopis' love for Krishna is the topmost love, then how can we accept that? Because Krishna left Vrindavan. If his love for them is the greatest, why did he leave them? And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains in a very important purport that just as a goldsmith wants to show the purity of gold, and to show the purity of it, he heats it with fire and the gold melts. So in the same way, to show the purity of the gopis' love and the exalted nature of their love, which is even greater than the love of Lakshmi Devi, Krishna applies the heat known as Vipralamba Agni, or the fire of separation, to the hearts of the gopis. And with that heat of separation, then we can see the love of the gopis. And therefore, Krishna says in Adi Lila chapter 4 of Chaitanya Charitamrita that Mora Putra, Mora Saka, Mora Pranapati, Ebhavijay Mora Kori Sudha Bhakti. If someone thinks of me, Mora Putra, they think of me as their son, Mora Saka, their friend, Mora Pranapati, the Lord of their life, their beloved. If persons think of me in this way, then I become, he says, Amitahara Adina, I become subordinate to that person. And this is the wonderful, wonderful glories of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And this 47th chapter of the 10th canto, this Brahmara-gita, is a very essential aspect in understanding this, as is Uddhava's prayers to the gopis glorifying them. So, and this is further manifested in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And here Krishna is telling, he's speaking that in Adi Lila chapter 4, that Mata Mori Putra Bhavi Kore Ene Bandhana, that my mother sometimes, because she's thinking of me as being subordinate to her. Sometimes she ties me up with a rope. Sakasuda Saki Kori Skande Arohana. Sometimes my friends, they come, Skande also means on the shoulders, and they Arohana means to get up on. They climb up on my shoulders. And they say, Tumi kon Badalok, Tumi Amisam, that you're not such a big person. You and I, we're equal. And Krishna gets so much pleasure from that. He doesn't get so much pleasure when someone worships him with so much opulence. Rather, he gets pleasure when sweetness is being offered. So this is a very, very essential point in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And we see this in the meeting in Kurukshetra, because in Kurukshetra we'll find that the gopis are there, but the Mahishis are also there. And Krishna leaves the queens and leaves the residence of the Yadu dynasty and goes and he puts Uddhava in front of him, Jiva Goswami says, and he goes to see Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj first, and then he sneaks off to see the gopis. Why does he keep Uddhava in front of him? As a message to them. I didn't forget you. See who's in front of me, Uddhava? That's the person I sent with a message of love. Although that was Krishna's purpose, to give a message, a greater purpose was that Krishna wanted to hear from Uddhava. Krishna wanted to try to understand the love of the gopis. Krishna himself couldn't understand it. So these verses are very important. And Jiva Goswami, as we cited in the beginning, is praying to Uddhava because Uddhava understands the Gopi Mahatmya, the glories of the gopis. And without the blessings of Uddhava, without understanding this, we can't understand the nature of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the nature of Vrindavan. So if we go to Vrindavan today, there's a place known as Bilvavan, also known as Laksmivan. And it's on the other side of the Jamuna River from Vrindavan. And there in that place, there's a deity of Lakshmi Devi. I think it's maybe the only deity of Lakshmi Devi practically in all of Vrindavan. And Lakshmi Devi, she goes there and she's not allowed in Vrindavan. And it's very interesting, every year during Magh Mas, during the coldest month of the year, the Brijbasis, they do a festival, I think on every Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. And they go to Bilvavan and they have a festival for Lakshmi Devi. But this festival is a very unique festival. It's different than any other festival of worship of Lakshmi Devi anywhere else. They're not coming to worship Lakshmi Devi, although they do some artik and things. They're not coming to offer prayers to her. They're not coming to beg anything from her, just the opposite. They're coming there to give their ashirvad, their blessing. And they cook a feast for Lakshmi Devi. And what do they cook for Lakshmi Devi? She lives in the Vaikuntha planets and she has all the rasgullas and paneer and pakoras and all the most opulent things. They cook khichdi for her. That's the item. Because khichdi is a very simple Vrindavan kind of item. And they go before her and they pray, Lakshmi Devi, we hope everything goes okay. And you can enter into Vrindavan, because Lakshmi Devi's been there for thousands of years doing austerities so that she can enter into the Ras Leela. So these are very important points. We'll hear more later on also when we get finally to the part speaking about how the meeting in Kurukshetra and how the gopis are much, much more elevated than the queens of Dwarka. And therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spoke this verse, which is quoted by Rupa Goswami in his Padyavali and also in Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is also a very, very important verse. He says, Naham Vipro, I'm not a Brahman. Naham Vipro, Nachara Narapaiti, Naipi Vaishyo, Nasudro. He says, I'm not Narapati, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a king. Narapati means the Lord of the common living entities. I'm not a Brahman. I'm not a Kshatriya. Naipi Vaishya, na Sudro. I am not a Vaishya, I'm not a Sudra. Naham Varni. What does Naham Varni mean? Naham Varni means that person who doesn't have a Varna. That's a brahmachari. The brahmachari, he's not a businessman. He's not much of anything. He's Naham Varni. He doesn't know what his Varna is. It's another synonym for Brahmachari. Naham Varni, Nacha Grihapatir. I'm not a Grihapati. I'm not a Grihasta. I'm not a Vanaprastha. Yati. I'm not a sannyasi. Kintu Prodyan Nikila Paramananda Pranamritabdir. The only thing that I consider myself to be is Gopi Bhartahu Padakamalaya Dasa Dasanu Dasaha. I'm the servant of the servant of the servant of the Gopis of Vrindavan. And this is our philosophy. Krishna finished the Bhagavad Gita, which is a very famous book of religion. But Krishna finished the Bhagavad Gita by saying, Sarva Dharmam Parityaga, give up religion, give up Dharma. Everybody wants to practice religion so they can become free from pop. But Krishna says, give up Dharma. He doesn't say give up pop, give up sin. He says, give up Dharma, and I'll protect you from pop. And in our Goswami literatures, a similar point is made in Hari Bhakti Vilas and Bhakti Sandarbha, where they quote a verse from Padma Purana. It's also found in Skanda Purana, where Krishna says, Manimitam kritam papam apidharmaya kolpate. That if someone does something which seems sinful, but they're doing it for me, then that pop, apidharmaya kolpate, it becomes dharma. But on the other hand, mama nadritu dharmopi, if someone neglects me, then their so-called dharma, papam shan mat prabhavata, their so-called dharma becomes pop. And the example of this is the Gopis of Vrindavan. And it's very difficult for common people to understand. To this day, in India, a lot of people worship Krishna, but still to this day, a lot of people, they say, well, Ramachandra's better because he took a vow, Ekopatni Brata. He only had one wife. He was very religious. And they try to impose their mundane conception of Dharma and morality on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so by some external appearances, it seems that Lord Ramachandra is superior, but actually the superior personality is Krishna. And in a paradoxical way, what makes him supreme is these 16 faults that he has, which appear in a conditioned soul, which make him human-like and make him greater than God. And in a paradoxical way, although Laksmi Devi is the perfect devotee and the most chaste lady and things, the Gopis of Vrindavan is superior, even though they're married to someone else. It seems that their behavior is irreligious, but it's not. It's a paradox. And in fact, our acharyas have described, we often comment on this from Madhya chapter 8, Kaviraj Goswami says that Saba Eka Saki Ganyar Ihan Adhikar Saki Hoite Hoy E Lila Bishtar, that only the Gopis, Saba Eka Sakti Ganyar, only the Gopis, Ihan Adhikar, only the Gopis have Adhikar, or qualification, to understand the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. And it's the Gopis who do Lila Bishtar. They are able to expand the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. Sakibina, without the Gopis, a Lila Pusha Nahi Hoy, those pastimes of Radha and Krishna, Pusha means to nourish, they're not nourished. Saki Lila Bishtariya, Saki Asvadoy. And the Gopis are doing two things. They're expanding those pastimes, Bishtariya, and Asvadoy. They're relishing those pastimes. So this is the business of the followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that we have to learn to relish, we have to learn to follow in the footsteps of the Gopis. And therefore Srila Prabhupada gave us our prayers to Tulsi Devi, Seva Adhikara Diya Koro Nija Dasi, that you please make me your Dasi, your Nija Dasi, which means a Saki Manjari. It's a very high prayer. We pray like this. This is our goal. It's not something that we may be able to relate to, because it's something very, very high. But at the same time, we can relate to it because it's something that Srila Prabhupada stressed. It's something we can relate to because it's something that Raghunath Das Goswami stressed and our acharyas. So as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur commented, We were speaking, I think, last night or night before. He said, you don't have qualification for this, but you should know that such things exist. You should at least know that such things exist. And therefore, we worship Radha Krishna in the temple. I don't think Srila Prabhupada ever installed any deities of Lakshmi Narayan. He installed deities of Radha Krishna, Radha Govinda, Radha Gopinath, Radha Madan Mohan, etc. But Prabhupada said that in our conditioned state, Radha Krishna don't accept that worship, but Lakshmi Narayan does. So two things are going on simultaneously. On one hand, due to our lack of qualification, Lakshmi Narayan is accepting our worship. But on the other hand, he didn't name the deities Lakshmi Narayan. He named the deities Radha Krishna, Radha Shamsundar, and Vrindavan. And that's our goal. That's our focus. So this all comes from this discussions from the Brahmara-gita and from the prayers of Uddhava. And we'll hear more about his discussions with Krishna when he goes to Madhya Lila chapter 8, Sarvajit Prabhu. Let me find it. It's nice verses. Text number 202. You could go all the way up to 205. I think there's even a few other verses too. There's some quotes from Govinda Lilamrita speaking the same kind of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there and just see if anybody online has any comments or anything. Doesn't look like it. If anybody has any reflections or anything, we can share that. Otherwise, I have a meeting in about an hour, so I need to walk a half an hour to go to it. So quit. But if anybody has any reflections, in Sarvadrik Prabhu, would you like to share any thoughts?
I have a reflection.
I think you're muted still, Prabhu.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just posted a quote from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's version. It's very beautiful. His perspective on Gopis. If you could read it for those that are on WhatsApp or on Facebook. Are you saying it?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Are you saying the quote?
This quote from Chaitanya Charitamrita. You said Bhakti Vinod.
Oh, it's Bhaktivinoda Thakur.
Well, there's a similar statement from Bhakti Vinod. He says Satakoti Gopi Madhavaman. It begins as a song beginning with that, which speaks about the glories of Radharani in particular and how only Radharani can attract the mind of Krishna. But I was speaking from these verses here. These are from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila chapter 8, where he says, where Kaviraj Goswami says, Saba Eka Saki Ganar Ihanadikar Saki Hoite Hoya a Lila Bishtar, how the gopis are doing this Lila Bishtar. They're expanding the pastimes of Krishna, Radha Krishna. And this is why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes with Srup Damodar and Roy Ramananda, because the Radha Krishna's pastimes are expanding in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And this is why in our disciplic line, it's a very high thing, but it's something we should know about. At least we should know it exists. Our Guru Janas are generally conceived to be Saki Manjaris because they're expanding. Prabhupada commented on that once in Hawaii. Rameshwar Prabhu asked him something about the verse Nikunja Yuno Rati Keli Siddhyai. And Prabhupada replied that this is book distribution. That when someone is going out and doing book distribution, that's the work of the gopis, and they're bringing together different personalities. Is that okay, Sarvadrik? Are you looking for these verses? Is that what you meant?
No, I didn't get it posted properly. It's up now, if you'd like to read it. On the chat window.
Okay, let me go back to the chat. Whoops, what's happening here? I'm going to stop that. Devi Lakshmi Shruti Gana Dharane Lotsave Gopi Jana Adhikara Rawate Gawe. Parvati Lakshmi and the personified Vedas cry in great happiness while rolling on the ground and singing of the fortunate position of the damsels of Braj Bhumi. Oh, that's an excellent verse. Is that from Gita Mala, perhaps?
I'm not sure. It's a verse from a bhajan that's sung in different Gaudiya mats.
Uh-huh. Wow.
At least Bhakti Vaibhav Purimara is this month. They sing this bhajan. It's very beautiful bhajan.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. Krishna Kun, you wanted to share something? Can you come here, or you can just speak loud? I think they can probably hear you with this mic.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much. It's a very simple reflection, but I was just really struck by Lakshmi Devi and how she is always present in Vrindavan. Because we know that she's been performing austerities, and you mentioned a story about how the Brijbasis are coming every year and blessing her and making kitri for her. And I was just thinking that this is the only way. Just be very, very, very humble. Then we can also maybe one day have a place.
I like thinking that Lakshmi Devi actually she's made
like she's having a place in Gobar.
She made it in the form of the Gobar.
That's my point. That she didn't make it, but how she made it. She made it when she was super humble. Then we can have some chance. Anyway.
I had a question for you also, Prabhu.
Yeah. Go ahead, Prabhu.
Can we consider the bhava of the acharyas in our line and so much information as we're discussing this evening, one can get the impression that Manjari Bhav, Sakya Bhav, Madhurya Rasa is where it's at, and Sakya Bhav and Vatsalya Bhav gets left in the dust. So how are we to understand?
Well, that's an in-depth discussion, and I know there's definitely different attitudes toward that amongst different Vaishnavas. I'll just express my own humble understanding of it. First of all, we understand that there's four primary rasas, and our philosophy is that someone can be in any one of them. And there are examples of Sakya Ras in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, especially with the followers of Gauridas Pandit and others. However, speaking with Fakir Mohan Prabhu, who did some elaborate research on all the different Gaudiya Vaishnava schools and some other Vaishnavas who've done similar research, even in those Sakya Ras lines, they glorify Manjari Bhav as being the topmost. They still conceive of it in that way. And we hear in the Anarpita Chirim Chirat verse, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, very important verse, how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come, he's Krishna, he's come to give something he hasn't given in a long, long time, and that's Unnata Ujjvala Rasa Svabhakti Shriyam, which is that Manjari Bhav. That's the primary thing that he came to give. And Krishna came because, as he told the Gopis, Napariyaham Niravadya Samyujam, I'm in your debt. And that debt was his purpose in coming. He was in debt to the Gopis. He wasn't in debt to the cowherd boys. He wasn't in debt to Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj. But in particular, he was in debt to the Gopis. Now, it doesn't mean that in our line, we only have this particular line. Just as we heard from Srila Prabhupada speaking to Malati, saying, if you want to worship Lord Narayan, that's okay. Why not? But why not worship Krishna, who's cent per cent? So sometimes devotees will have attraction for some other feature of the Lord. They may have some attraction for Sakya Ras or some other rasa. No harm with that, but that's not the primary teaching of Rupa Goswami. It's not the primary teaching of our line, of our Goswamis, although it's there in a few very rare literatures. Is that helpful, Prabhu?
Yes, thank you. Prabhu? I understand that, but I'm just trying to digest the fact that, because if we examine the sadhana that Srila Prabhupada instituted in temples all over the world, our standard process could be argued to be very Madhurya Bhav laden. Our Tulsi Arti, our Gravashtikam, and this is like topmost Rasika song, this Tulsi song we sing every day. I mean, I know one of my godbrothers doesn't sing that song just for that reason.
Yeah, those Tulsi prayers. I think you're familiar with some of the Gaudiya Mutt temples. As far as I know, there's no Gaudiya Mutt temples who sing the Tulsi prayers that we sing, because they're banned. They're considered to be too elevated. Maybe there's some exceptions, I don't know, but
they sing here at this Gaudiya Mutt. They sing in the evening though. They sing Chandrasekhar's Tulsi Puja and they sing Krishna Das's Tulsi Puja also simultaneously. Not simultaneously,
but one after another, sequentially. Yeah.
but in the evening.
That's nice. I know, like in was it Srila Prabhupada's Sannyas Guru, Keshav Maharaj, Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj's line, they don't sing that song because it was considered to be too intimate. And I think also in the line of Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, they don't sing it either. But I marked it at the Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan where Prabhupada was staying. They sing that song every day. They have Tulsi Arti twice a day, and they sing that song there. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I don't want to get really into it in a whole big debate about it. I have, and you're not presenting an argument, I understand, but some devotees are very concerned about this topic and they like to argue about it. I don't really see any point in arguing about it. There's some that say Prabhupada's a cowherd boy, and some say that Prabhupada's a gopi. My Guru Maharaj, he said that we should realize this.
Yes, exactly.
Without realizing it, what's the point in just arguing about it? And it's really foolish and silly. But some devotees I've marked who my Guru Maharaj was in favor, he had some strong things to say that Prabhupada was actually a Sakhi Manjari. And he said that Prabhupada revealed that to him. That's another deeper topic, probably better we don't speak about. But some devotees who follow that line, or follow that mood, they comment, as you were just doing, that Prabhupada, all the prayers that he gave were really in Madhurja Ras. They weren't in Sakhya Ras. They weren't prayers like that. And that's a very interesting thing. Okay?
Yeah, it's a whole topic, but I just wanted to bring it up if you could touch on it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's good. It's nice to touch on some little controversial things too, just to be honest with devotees and like that. I think it's good to be able to discuss things. I just don't like it when devotees want to say that it's my way or the highway, which is completely against Gaudiya Vaishnavism, because Gaudiya Vaishnavism, we appreciate there's so many different moods and so many different ways to worship the Lord. So thank you, Prabhuji. Leela Purushottam Prabhu, I think you had something, did you?
Yes, yes. I'd like to ask, because you were quoting this part of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami's statement that Aishwarya Prema Shitila, that Aishwarya, knowledge of Lord's opulence, that it shrinks the love. And just yesterday on our reading, we went through the verse, it's 10:29:32, where the Gopis starts to come up with a strategy to convince Krishna why he should not send them back to Vrindavan from the Rasa Leela. And the verse goes in a sense that they are aware of Krishna's opulence, of Krishna's being the God. And Vishwanath Chakravarti, he explains in his commentary to that verse quite like striking thing, that how the mechanism works is that during the viraha, during the separation, you can be aware of Krishna's position as being the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Whereas when you're aware of it during the Sambhog part of the Leela, it shows that your prema is immature, it's not so developed, so high.
Wow.
And I received a question. It was quite interesting because I was mentioning this quote, Aishwarya Prema Shitila, exactly this phrase.
Mm-hmm.
And then immediately I received a question like, so does it mean that if the Gopis were in this instance aware of Krishna's position as a Supreme Personality of Godhead, does it mean that their prema shrunk in the essence of that awareness? And then to me, the many instances came like from the further chapters of Rasa Panchadhyaya, how in the madness of separation they were even like playing the role of Krishna, imitating his pastimes, killing the demons and everything. So I had a tendency to interpret it that in that sense it doesn't shrink the prema. Rather, it's like a symptom of like Divyun Mat, the madness of separation. But so I wanted to ask you if you have any more
I have some
insights.
thoughts on it. There's two types of sneha, Grita sneha and Madhu sneha. Sneha, which is like ghee, and sneha, which is like honey. And Chandravali, those gopis, their sneha is like ghee, whereas Radharani's is like honey. And in separation, when that fire is applied to honey, ultimately it becomes hard, it becomes thick. Whereas the ghee becomes weak and becomes very, very loose. So although it appears that, although it is said that Aishvarya Priti Sankuchita, that opulence makes love shrink, we see that in Kurukshetra, it doesn't make their love shrink. We see in the Brahmara-gita, their love is, when they understand something about the position of Krishna as being Bhagavan, the gopis are expressing that, we were hearing it before, their love wasn't shrunken, rather it becomes more and more intense. And we find that significantly in Jagannath Puri, where Lord Jagannath is Aishvarya, Madhurya, Yugala, Milan. He's a combined form of both opulence and sweetness. And Sanatana Goswami in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, he says that Maha Aishvarya, he says that in Jagannath Puri, it's great, great opulence. But at the same times, he says that it's ramyam. It's very, very sweet. So both things are there. In Kurukshetra, when the gopis and Brijbasis see Krishna's opulence with all the kings and all the wealth and jewels and everything, it doesn't make their love shrink. Rather, it makes it more intense because we just don't want to see you like this. And this is the astounding nature of the Braj Gopikas. So, I appreciate your point. That's a great comment. That's 10:39:22?
32.
32. Yeah, great
it's
comment.
wonderful purport, actually. It's
yeah,
because he explains that he compares the viraha to the sun rays, like heating, and it has as a sun, it has a power to illuminate all Krishna's qualities, including his opulence. That's why during the viraha, Krishna's opulence can be revealed. But the sambhog is compared to the moon rays, like cooling, and in that situation, that part of Krishna's personality might remain hidden for the probably like the relishment and sweetness of the leela, so that it doesn't.
Wow, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing it. You had something else too? You said you had two things?
One more thing. I was also, it's coming from our discussions, like we've been like speaking about those three types of rati, this Sadarani, Samanjasa, and Samartha rati, with those examples like Kubja Mahishis, Dvarak Mahishis, and Gopis. And then when I was like trying to delineate the differences, I appeared for myself in quite I didn't know if I can dare to present it like that, because the picture that came out was like Kubja representing quite a like material motivation, just to enjoy, the spirit of enjoying Krishna. And then that was still quite acceptable, well, like, because that's the example which is given. And then with the Dvaraka Mahishis, it sounded too rough to me, like, because I remember when Indra Prabhu was speaking about this topic, he was using the phrase like, with Mahishis, with the queens, it's like 50-50, desire for pleasure of Krishna and pleasure of themselves. compared to the Gopis' most exalted rati, most exalted attraction, which is like 10% for Krishna's pleasure. And I was like, when I was speaking about that part with Mahishi, it was like 50-50, really. That sounds like too rough in a sense, like it's to comparing like how exalted personalities they are actually. So I wanted to ask you if you would have any guidelines how to, if it's proper to discuss it in these terms, or if you would have any.
We learned from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's behavior how to be a devotee. And Mahaprabhu gave all respect to all the devotees of the Lord, not just the Mahishis, the queens of Dwarka, but also to Prahlad Maharaj and Dhruva Maharaj, and devotees who were even in rasas that we would consider to be inferior, lower than Madhurja ras. But at the same time, we know from Srinath Chakravarti Thakur that Ramya Kacharupasana Braja Vidu, that the topmost thing is the worship of the gopis. So we do two things at the same time. We give respect, but for us, what we really want to follow, we understand the topmost thing, as Prabhupada was telling Malati. She couldn't even understand. And she was thinking, oh, Prabhupada, why are you worshiping Vishnu instead of Krishna? But Prabhupada's telling her, no, we're worshiping Krishna, not Vishnu. But she couldn't quite pick that up. It's so simple at that time. But Prabhupada's telling her this very basic thing, and Prabhupada gave us this very basic thing in our Tulsi prayers, as Sarvadrik Prabhu was mentioning. We see in Swakya, the love is hoitiki priti. It has some motivation. And therefore, it's also known as patitva. It has that tva, means the quality of the pati. He's my husband. And that's sopadika priti. That's love with a designation. But when we look at parakiya ras, which is what our acharyas have come to glorify, we see it as ramatva. The primary quality is not patitva. Patitva means as thinking he's my husband, but ramatva, I just love him for his sweet qualities. And therefore it's ahoitiki priti, and it's nirupadika priti. It has no motivation and it has no designations. So I don't know if that helps any.
Yeah.
Nice reflections of Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Gorni Tai Prabhu, you had something? Shall I read your comment? You want to comment in person? You're back at the farm now, Gorni Tai?
Yes, I am there.
Okay. In Brihad Bhagavatamrita, you've written, although the mood of Gopakumar, Sarup is Sakya, they're glorifying the gopis as Srimati Radharani. That's a really nice comment also. And that's what I understand. I'm just like a fly, not like a bee, on the outside of the jar of the honey, trying to understand something of the nectar on the inside, which can only be experienced by directly tasting it. So I have some theoretical understanding, but my theoretical understanding that even when we talk about Sakya Ras in our line, like the line of Gauridas Pandit and others, or as Sanatana Goswami presents in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, as you're mentioning, they're glorifying Madhurja Ras, they're glorifying the gopis and Srimati Radharani, and that's the topmost thing. Thank you, Bhanitai Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Anybody else with any reflections, anything? Anybody here in the room? A few devotees here. Mataji has something? Let me just turn this for you.
In connection with the comment that Mataji Krishna Kunt made about Lakshmi, and I was thinking this ability of Lakshmi to continue to perform austerity, is it also expression of this her humility? Because I was thinking, if she knows that she cannot enter Rasa dance, for example, why she continue to do those austerities?
Well, it seems that, and maybe Sarvadrika, some others could correct me, but it seems that by her nature, she has some faith in austerities, in the necessity for austerities. The Braj Gopikas also do austerities, but their austerities are, the austerities of the gopis are not a conscious just choice that I think I'll do austerities, I'm going to get this thing, but it's just a manifestation of their ecstatic love for Krishna. They want to do Katyayani Brata, or something. It's not that they don't depend so much on Katyayani Brata. It's not that Krishna thinks, wow, the way they did that Brata, I have to come to them. But it's because of their ecstatic love. But Lakshmi Devi, it seems she doesn't have as much faith in that as she does in doing austerities and things, which is a common, therefore we hear when we, in our chanting of the holy name, that Dharma Brata Tyaga Hutadi Sarva Subha Kriya Samyamapi Pramadaha, that the sixth offense of the holy name is to consider this different acts of Dharma, Vanashram Dharma, Dharma Brata, doing austerities, Dharma Brata Tyaga, doing some Brata, doing some austerities, Dharma Brata Tyaga, Huta Adi, doing fire sacrifices, etc., to be equal to the holy name. With the Gopis, they're just chanting. Does that help?
Yes.
Lila Purushottam comments, he says, there's a wonderful passage in Brihad Bhagavatam where Sanatana Goswami explains that doubt about the soul's inclination toward the different moods. Maybe lower than Madhurya Rasa, the Lord's partiality with some souls over the others. That's an interesting thing. And I think that may tie in also with the Anarpita Chirim Chirat verse. Okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead and stop here. Thank you very much. Sarvadrik Prabhu, thank you very much for taking part. I appreciate your comments and things. And please forgive me if I'm saying anything wrong. I'm just a little boy in comparison to you. You're my Guru John. Hare Krishna. So I hope we'll be here next week. I'm a little confused. I think next week, let's see, next week we'll be in Kazakhstan. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this there or not, because we have some other classes and things. So we'll see. And the week after that, I think we'll be in some really remote, strange place called Czech with some really strange people. Krishna Kon.
In Kazakhstan, we will have a class that morning about Mahaprabhu, and we will stream it.
Okay, so we'll have something next week, but it won't maybe be exactly on this. It'll be something about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. All right, thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveda Bhakta Binda ki, Gopremanandi Hari Hari Bol, Vancha Kalpadarubhischa, Kripa Sindhu Vyeva Cha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha, Nanda Kori Vaishnavindi.